Oh, hi. Welcome to your second video.
Today's video is brought to you by Transitive Verb Sentence Patterns and the Clause-Phrase Divide. I know, it sounds exciting. Please excuse my nose. I'm a little bit sick right now. So what better place to start than with what is a transitive verb? We had briefly talked about this last time, but just to recap, we can think about a transitive verb as a verb that needs to act on something else, on another noun, in order to complete the thought. In which case, we come to our first sentence pattern. In this sentence, we have, again, our subject and our predicate. In the predicate, we have the transitive verb and the direct object. So if we take, for example, Talia hit the ball, Talia is our subject, hit the ball is our predicate, and hit is our transitive verb, where ball, or the ball, is the direct object. Nailed it. Sometimes an action benefits another noun. Verbs are not selfish people. So, in this case, we have something that's an additional object, and it's called the indirect object, or the IO. In English, this can be either explicit, which means that it uses a preposition, usually to or for, or it's implicit, which means that it's there in theory, but we don't actually say it out loud. So, for example, implicitly we would say Daniel bought his boyfriend flowers, right? Explicitly, with the preposition, we would say Daniel bought flowers for his boyfriend, okay? And so what that means is that it's the same type of pattern, right? It's just there's about a word difference in terms of if we were to lay it out in the sentence pattern. So we have subject, and our predicate is another transitive verb, and then there's going to be a direct object and an indirect object, okay? And remember, this has to do with benefiting. So gave, bought, that sort of thing. Hey, I bought these for you. Oh my god, thank you, Daniel. Oh. Okay, that's quite enough of that. So, our last sentence structure, get excited kids, our last sentence structure is actually a combination of two different sentence structures, okay? It will have something of a linking verb that's embedded in the sentence. It's not actually there, but it's part of what the sentence is trying to do. In this case, the subject will complete an action toward a direct object that renames the direct object. So for example, I painted the room purple, okay? So on the first side of things, we have the transitive sentence, I painted the room, right? The second part would be pattern 2. The room is purple, or the room is now purple. As we learned in a linking sentence, this second part is called a complement. However, we're not renaming the subject, but rather the object. So, instead of calling it a subject complement, it is now called an object complement. And so in our sentence, we have the subject, and the predicate would be a transitive verb, the direct object, and the object complement. See, not hard at all. So what's cool about this particular structure is that it can show us something in changing. So we have this bubble, right? So now I'm going to color this bubble black. Boom! I colored the bubble black. All of a sudden, we have sentence pattern 6. You now know how 90% of English sentences are structured. Go you. So just to review, we have our first 3 patterns, which are with the to be verb, a linking verb, and an intransitive verb. All of them have a subject. In the first pattern, we have subject plus to be plus an adverbial prepositional phrase, usually of location. I am in the house. Pattern 2 is subject plus a linking verb, which might be to be, but it can also be a sensing or feeling word. And then a subject complement, which is an adjective or noun that renames the subject. The water is cold, or the water tastes cold. And in our final pattern, pattern 3, we have subject plus an intransitive verb and in parentheses an adverbial prepositional phrase. So this would be something like she sleeps, or she sleeps on the couch. And just for good measure, our other 3 patterns, pattern 4, 5, and 6, are all with transitive verbs. So we have subject and a transitive and a direct object, because that is the definition of a transitive verb. In pattern 5, we include an indirect object, and in pattern 6, we provide an object complement, which renames the direct object. If we look at the diagrams for transitive verbs, we can see some similarities with the first 3 diagrams that we saw before. So we have our subject, we have our verb on this cross that are separated by a line. Now, what happens when you separate the subject, verb, and direct object is that between the verb and the direct object, we get another straight line. And it has to be straight, right? Because this is not like a subject complement that goes backwards, right? It points back to the subject. However, we can see that in pattern 6, we do have that slanted line again because the object complement is acting like an adjective or a renaming of the direct object. The last thing to notice is that pattern 5, like pattern 3, has the adverbial prepositional phrase underneath the verb. Notice that I put preposition in parentheses because sometimes that will be implicit and sometimes that will be explicit. If it is not there, if it's implicit, you don't have to put anything there. It's just insinuated. So the last thing we need to do is we need to talk about the difference between a sentence, a clause, and a phrase. Because that fourth pattern with the transitive verb, the subject, transitive verb, direct object, things will come after the direct object. And I don't want you to get confused about why is this pattern 4 and not a different pattern. There's stuff that comes after it. It looks like it should be one of the other ones. So everything that we've learned up to now are examples of clauses, specifically an independent clause, okay? And so there's 2 types of clauses. There's independent and dependent, also called subordinate clauses. So an independent clause is automatically, we usually would refer to that as a sentence, right? It stands alone. It doesn't need anything next to it or to make sense. It makes sense by itself, okay? A dependent clause has the makings of an independent clause, but it usually has an introductory word that means it's a condition of something else. So I wanted to go to the store, but I had to curl my hair. The sentence "I had to curl my hair" would be an independent clause. However, the "but" at the beginning of it makes it sound like we need more information for this to be complete. As we learned in the very first video, we have noun phrases and we have verb phrases, right? So every independent and dependent clause is going to have phrases within it and ones that modify it, right? So we always have a noun phrase and we always have a verb phrase. In addition, we can have things like adjectival and adverbial phrases, right? An adjectival phrase is going to be one that's modifying nouns, and an adverbial phrase is one that modifies verbs. So, when we put these separate phrases together, we get clauses. If that clause needs more information or another clause to make sense, that would be a dependent or subordinate clause. If it makes complete sense by itself, we would have an independent clause. When we have something that makes complete sense by itself, then we have what's called a sentence. So we're not going to go over the clause part here is just for you to jog your memory. So clause is a complete thought, right? And we have the dependent and the independent. Phrases, okay, can come in a lot of different kinds. So we said that there's adjectival and there's adverbial phrases. And within these, right, we can have things like infinitive phrases, participial phrases, right, prepositional phrases. And these prepositional phrases or participial phrases can become adjectival, or they can be or adverbial. An infinitive phrase like "to study Spanish" can take the place of a noun phrase, right? So I like to study Spanish. In that case, I like, we have the subject, we have a transitive verb, and the direct object would be to study Spanish. You don't have to worry too much about knowing how this all works right now, but the basic thing you need to know is a phrase is an incomplete thought as opposed to a clause, which is a complete thought. Just like last time, if you'd like to look at some extra help, I've cued you into the Hacker about verbs, clauses, and phrases, as well as, again, the grammar section on CourseWeb. You can look at diagramming sentences and sentence patterns.
I live for the applause, applause, applause. I live for the applause, applause, live for the applause.